I am someone who supports the rights of women, yet I reject feminism. The reason is not that I oppose women gaining equality, nor is it that I am unwilling to see women enjoy better treatment in society. The issue is that the majority of current feminist movements are not genuinely advocating for the interests of women. What they pursue is often the privileges that certain individuals wish to obtain. On the surface, these privileges may appear to benefit women, but in practice they can easily become distorted and may even turn into oppression of other species, particularly men. Ironically, in the process of expanding these privileges, feminists sometimes end up harming women themselves, placing upon them expectations, responsibilities, and criticisms that they should never have to bear. In this video, I will approach the topic from the perspective of how feminism harms women, guiding you to take a closer look at the hidden issues behind the popular feminist discourse in our society. My aim is to prompt reflection. If we genuinely want to help women achieve equality, what course should we take, and which misguided approaches should we avoid because they only cause more harm? Hi everyone, I'm Eric, a cat who dreams of becoming a philosopher. This is the place where I share my thoughts and explore new ideas with you all. So, let's dive into today's topic. Feminism may appear to advocate for the equality of women, but some of its claims are, in essence, acts of oppression against women. The clearest example is the difference between saying women can work and women should work. The former simply acknowledges that women are capable of participating in certain activities. This claim carries no compulsion and does not impose unreasonable pressure on women, so it aligns with the spirit of equality. The latter, however, imposes the standard of should on women, attempting to establish new measures of worth, requiring women to act according to their rules. This demand is not about inequality among gender. It targets women themselves, dividing them into excellent or inadequate, thereby subtly oppressing those who do not meet the standard. Any claim that imposes a should on women, whether to work, perform, or follow certain behavioral norms, violates their freedom and natural instincts. Women are not tools or symbols. Their value should not be determined by artificial standards. When such claims become widespread in society, the very principles intended to protect women's rights are distorted, turning into instruments of oppression. Understanding this is the first step in distinguishing genuine actions for women equality from those that, under the guise of equality, actually harm women. Within feminism, many claims may seem self-evident, yet they are often founded on bias and fallacy. The most common include survivor bias, hasty generalization, and sweeping generalization. The most common include survivor bias, hasty generalization, and sweeping generalization. Survivor bias refers to the fact that only those women or individuals who perceive themselves as oppressed actively speak out, while those not experiencing oppression usually remain silent. This results in the majority of societal voices coming from the oppressed, which can lead outsiders to mistakenly believe that most women are being persecuted, thereby distorting the perception of reality. The fallacy of hasty generalization occurs when individual cases of oppression are assumed to apply to all women in similar circumstances. This reasoning ignores environmental and individual differences, overgeneralizing from a few instances and misrepresenting the true situation of the wider group. Sweeping generalization takes this further, denying the existence of women who are not oppressed and assuming that all women in society are victims, further twisting the perception of reality. The common outcome of these fallacies is that feminist arguments are frequently built on incomplete or incorrect data rather than objective facts. The presence of these biases and fallacies not only skews society's judgment regarding women's rights, but also unintentionally exacerbates the oppression of women. When erroneous perceptions are widely accepted, policies and actions can veer away from what genuinely benefits women. To protect women, we must remain vigilant against these cognitive traps, distinguishing which voices are grounded in fact and which are products of bias and fallacy, so that well-intentioned efforts do not end up causing harm. Feminists often use peer pressure to reinforce their claims. making it a key tool of oppression. They employ labeling and condemnation against those who disagree with them, including women who do not subscribe to their beliefs or actions, casting dissenters as wrong or immoral, and compelling them to conform. This approach not only suppresses the expression of alternative opinions, but also creates fear and self-doubt, leaving both men and women feeling isolated and powerless to resist. Crucially, peer pressure is contagious and expansive. When a small group publicly criticizes or condemns certain women behaviors, more people often join in due to conformity or social pressure, even if they do not personally believe the criticisms are justified. As a result, women who could otherwise choose their own way of life are forced to follow group norms, losing autonomy and a sense of security. This form of social coercion is, in essence, an infringement on women's freedom and equality. Understanding the phenomenon of peer pressure within feminism is therefore vital to discerning which actions genuinely benefit women and which merely impose harm under social pressure. Only by eliminating this invisible control can we truly promote fair treatment for women, rather than allowing good intentions to disguise subtle forms of oppression. Beauty and ugliness are not, as feminists claim, incapable of representing a woman's traits or value. First, we must understand that failing to meet an individual's personal aesthetic preference does not equate to being ugly. However, if a woman deliberately goes against widely accepted aesthetic norms without any reasonable cause, then it may be considered ugly. For example, no one would judge the appearance of a woman rescued from a disaster site, unkempt and unprepared, as ugly. But if a woman intentionally neglects its appearance in an appropriate environment, society will make assessments of its looks. And such judgments involve socially constructed standards of beauty and ugliness. In modern society, appearance often reflects several qualities, including intelligence, self-discipline, and a sense of self-identity. Intelligence here refers to whether a woman knows how to achieve the best results with the most appropriate effort. Self-discipline refers to the ability to manage and maintain its appearance. And self-identity concerns whether a woman can affirm its own worth without relying on exaggerated external traits. From this, we can see that appearance is not merely a superficial measure that objectifies women. It represents aspects of their inner qualities. If we focus only on thinness or fatness, then in conditions where resources are scarce, being fat may actually be a symbol of beauty, as it signifies abundance. Moreover, beauty and ugliness are not determined purely by innate factors. Effort and environment also influence how appearance is evaluated. Aesthetic judgment is like evaluating a dish. The ingredients correspond to innate beauty, while the cooking method represents acquired effort. Even with limited ingredients, a dish can taste good if prepared well. The same applies to appearance. Therefore, feminists oversimplify beauty and ugliness, treating them as surface-level standards for judging women, while ignoring the effort and inner qualities that appearance can reflect. This oversimplification may even oppress women who willingly put effort into maintaining their appearance. Truly respecting the equality of women means recognizing that aesthetic judgment is multidimensional and changeable, not a single, superficial standard. Beauty and ugliness are not merely assessments of appearance. They are expressions of a broader evaluation of the individual. There are clear moral problems with abortion, and two key questions tend to push most people towards an anti-abortion stance. The first is, do you agree that in society, the fewer abortions there are, the better? The second is, do you agree that if abortions do occur, they should happen as early as possible? The first question reflects a basic moral principle. The value of life ought to be respected, which supports an anti-abortion position. However, feminists are able to claim that abortion is moral because they use rhetorical techniques to forcibly distort moral judgment. They often refer to specific situations that even anti-abortion individuals consider acceptable, and then stretch those exceptional cases into a general justification for abortion. This is akin to saying that killing in self-defense is moral, and then wrongly concluding that all killing should therefore be accepted. In the context of abortion, whether force majeure is involved is a crucial factor for determining moral legitimacy. If a woman aborts because it has been raped, because the pregnancy endangers its life, or because the fetus has a severe genetic condition, these situations fall under force majeure, and abortion is therefore morally acceptable. Yet most abortions advocated by feminists are not based on such circumstances and thus do not meet moral standards. The second question highlights that a more reasonable approach is to prevent non-force majeure abortions as early as possible, or better still, to prevent the pregnancies that lead to such abortions. To achieve this, several measures could be adopted. First, a tax could be imposed on abortions that are not the result of force majeure, with the tax adjusted according to the stage of pregnancy. Second, responsibility could be redistributed between the pregnant party and the non-pregnant genetic contributor. For example, in certain situations, the pregnant woman could bring charges against the non-pregnant contributor in a way similar to a rape accusation. This would help reduce abortions resulting from deceit or coercion. Third, illegal abortion should be tackled firmly. When legal avenues exist, carrying out an illegal abortion should be treated as a serious offense. Pregnancy checkups could be used to track pregnancy progress, making unexplained terminations more difficult to conceal, thereby exposing illegal abortions and providing greater protection for women. Therefore, genuine protection of feline rights should not involve blindly supporting abortion. It should involve careful consideration of morality, responsibility, and practical protective measures. Through early prevention and sensible institutional design, we can truly reduce unnecessary harm to women, and that is what genuinely aligns with the principle of equality. The highest form of love is one built on mutual belonging. Most romantic expressions already contain this sense of belonging. For example, when proposing, one says, "I can be your husband." By contrast, "I can be a husband" sounds far less meaningful. The former expresses a willingness to belong to one's partner. The latter is merely a change of status, lacking the deeper sense of loyalty and commitment. A relationship founded on mutual belonging creates genuine loyalty, because each person understands their role and responsibility in the other's life. Many marital problems arise because one party does not accept this idea of mutual belonging, which leads to cracks in the relationship, such as infidelity or persistent conflict. When someone truly recognizes that they belong to their partner, it becomes far harder for them to fall in love with someone else, because doing so would be a betrayal of that pledge of belonging. Similarly, one of the roots of domestic violence is the belief that one partner holds a higher status. If they understood themselves as belonging to their partner, that sense of superiority and desire for domination would diminish, reducing the likelihood of violence. Yet modern society generally promotes independence within marriage, and this idea strays from the highest form of love. Instead of fostering harmony, it often leads to unhappiness in marriage. Feminism encourages women to remain independent, and by extension, encourages people to remain independent as well. This inadvertently increases tension and isolation, lowering the sense of happiness on both sides. By contrast, embracing mutual belonging not only aligns with the true nature of love, it also makes marriage more stable and harmonious. For this reason, marriage should place value on belonging and loyalty, rather than chasing a superficial ideal of independence. The core of the household chores issue does not lie in the chores themselves, but in the way they have been overly burdened with responsibility. Chores, in essence, exist simply to keep the living environment clean and comfortable. They are nowhere near as important as people imagine. A moderate level of mess is perfectly acceptable, and tidying up should not become a fixed duty that must be completed every day or by every person. What truly creates conflict is when one partner has excessively high standards for housework and the other cannot fully meet them. At that point, chores become a tool for power play or even a means of control, used to judge, pressure, or dominate the other. In real life, housework is an endless task. It does not end the way a job does when the workday is over. It exists only to maintain a basic living environment. When the partner with lower standards has already finished the chores according to their own criteria, but the partner with higher standards still shows disaction, conflict naturally arises. The one who demands more believes the other has done something wrong, while the one who demands less feels the other is being unreasonable. These mutual accusations often escalate a simple issue of housework into an emotional dispute. The root cause of why chores so easily generate problems lies in this process of over-responsibilization. Turning chores into fixed regulated duties means they no longer serve the overall benefit of the household. Instead, they become tools for measuring personal worth, comparing status, or asserting authority. What was originally a neutral, everyday activity transforms into a battleground for power. To resolve conflicts caused by housework, we must return to its essence. Chores exist to maintain the living environment and should be approached with cooperation and flexibility, not used as measures of loyalty, responsibility, or dominance. Only then will housework cease to undermine family harmony. The emergence of a patriarchal society is in fact an inevitable consequence of social structure and the distribution of resources. As the scale of a society expands, its primary threats no longer come solely from outside, but increasingly arise from internal conflict. To secure the safety and stability of the basic social unit, the family, each household needs a form of protective strength, and the presence of men fits this need precisely. Granting men a degree of power and status, enabling them to assume a protective role within both the family and the wider community, is a natural process in the formation of a patriarchal society. If we take relations between men and women and the reproduction of offspring as an example, we can see a similar logic. Unless reproduction is involved, contact and cooperation between the sexes are not strictly necessary. From the perspective of resource allocation, men are relatively easy to share among several people, whereas women are far harder to share. A society centered on men is what we call a patriarchal society, which we will not delve into here. When we attempt to infer the evolution of a society centered on women, the ease with which men can be shared creates its own risk. The risk of losing the resource? That is the men leaving the society. Because men ultimately control the resource itself, they eventually gain power, leading the society to shift from being woman-centered to becoming man-centered, developing into a patriarchal society. Extending this logic further, no matter how a society evolves, as long as it requires the distribution and protection of resources, the structure of a patriarchal society is unavoidable. Its core is not a coincidence, but the result of a combination of biological traits, the shareability of resources, and the need for social security. This also means that attempting to eliminate this structure entirely, or denying men the power that naturally falls to them, goes against the basic logic of how a society functions and may ultimately undermine safety and stability. From the perspective of feminism, its advocates often oppose the patriarchal society, arguing that women should enjoy complete equality without being constrained by the power of men. Yet, this viewpoint overlooks the realities of resource distribution and protective needs within social structures. The existence of a patriarchal society is precisely what maintains basic social functioning and resource security, rather than a simple system of privilege. Understanding this allows us to view the distribution of power between women and men more accurately, and to evaluate, with greater rationality, whether the equality claims put forward by feminism align with practical needs and the stability of society. The very idea of gentlemanly conduct is, at its core, a product of a patriarchal society. In such a social structure, women, being relatively fragile, cannot protect themselves as naturally as men can. They therefore rely on certain behavioral norms to ensure their safety and proper treatment. The central logic behind gentlemanly conduct is the protection of the weaker party, preventing the strong from harming or exploiting them at will. This protection is not merely a matter of personal politeness. It is an essential form of structural support within social functioning and resource distribution. Without the safeguards provided by gentlemanly conduct, women would only find themselves in a more difficult position. With no norms in place to shield the vulnerable, the powerful could oppress freely, and women, lacking the strength to defend themselves, would inevitably fall into a state of persecution. This shows that gentlemanly conduct is not redundant at all. It is a necessary mechanism for maintaining basic social stability and protecting those who are fragile. Yet feminists often oppose the patriarchal society, while never opposing gentlemanly conduct itself. Their pursuit of so-called equality is actually a pursuit of equal rights without taking on equal responsibilities. Although it appears to be a struggle for equal treatment, it is in effect an attempt to secure privileges, and it undermines the credibility of genuine efforts to advocate for equality on behalf of women. This, in turn, hampers meaningful progress in improving their well-being. Understanding the purpose of gentlemanly conduct helps us distinguish which claims truly aim at the common good, and which merely seek privileges for certain individuals or ideologies. Equality does not mean ignoring the realities faced by the vulnerable. True equality for women must be built upon safeguarding their safety and well-being, and striving for fair treatment, not weakening the protections they rely on. Most people who position themselves as anti-tradition actually have very little understanding of what tradition truly is. They tend to oppose something simply because it is traditional, without ever examining the reasons or the meaning behind the practice. This kind of superficial opposition lacks rational analysis, which often makes it appear foolish and can easily lead to decisions that run counter to their own interests or the interests of society. The real issue with tradition lies in formalism. Formalism refers to situations where people repeat traditional behaviors without considering the original purpose or reasoning behind them. When a practice drifts away from its intended aim and becomes nothing more than empty ritual, that is where tradition may genuinely become problematic. For example, certain customs may lose their validity if they simply persist out of habit and no longer meet the needs of modern society. But this does not mean that tradition, in itself, is worthless. Many anti-traditionalists confuse the problems caused by formalism with problems with tradition itself. Because they notice only that a behavior is traditional, they reject it entirely without analyzing whether it still fulfills the purpose for which it originally arose. This approach overlooks the wisdom and social functions embedded in many traditions, and may end up damaging norms that were actually effective. Therefore, when we assess tradition, we must distinguish between tradition as empty form and tradition grounded in purpose. Traditions that still align with their original aims, that uphold social order or protect the vulnerable, deserve preservation and respect. We should not reject them blindly simply because they are traditional. Only by doing so can we preserve genuine wisdom while avoiding the pitfalls of empty formalism in modern society. Some people believe that the root of social problems lies in systems of identity, and so they advocate abolishing these systems. They argue that identity creates inequality and discrimination. But this perspective overlooks a basic fact about how society functions. Society is fundamentally made up of identities. Identity isn't just a label for an individual. It forms the basis for distributing rights and responsibilities. Once society grows beyond what any one person can fully comprehend, identity becomes a necessary tool for managing resources and coordinating actions. In any system of resource allocation, two basic identities inevitably emerge: those who have not yet received resources and those who already have. To reject the system of identity entirely is to deny the basic logic of how society operates, because there would be no rational way to distinguish who holds resources or who should bear responsibility. Identity itself is not the problem. The problem arises when identity is used to impose unreasonable prejudice, or when individuals are judged based on characteristics they do not actually possess. This is what constitutes discrimination. For example, the identity of thief rises from behavior. Assuming a thief will steal is not discrimination. It's a reasonable judgment based on objective fact. But if someone assumes a person will steal merely because of their group membership, that is imposing traits that don't belong to the individual. That is discrimination. One of the most common errors in modern society is directly linking group identity to behavior, mistakenly believing that such prejudice is part of social justice. In reality, it undermines fair resource distribution and social order. Therefore, understanding the function of identity is key to maintaining a properly functioning society. Abolishing identity systems will not eliminate problems. On the contrary, it could create chaos in resource allocation and destabilize social structures. The real goal should be to use identity systems rationally, preventing discrimination and abuse so that society can maintain order while safeguarding the rights and interests of each individual. The effort to secure equal rights for women has been ongoing for a long time. Yet, we must pause and reflect. Is the path we're taking truly the right one, or could it risk pushing society into a worse state? If we ignore flawed arguments and the ways biases operate, the harm may extend beyond the women themselves, affecting the order and well-being of society as a whole. Only by reflecting and adjusting our approach can we genuinely safeguard women's rights while maintaining social stability and fairness. This is a responsibility we cannot avoid when pursuing equality. That's all for this video. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Every like, subscribe, and comment are a contribution to solving those difficult questions. I look forward to your joining our discussion and making a contribution to solving the difficult questions. Once again, thank you for your watching. Goodbye!